What I love about play and competitive play is that the words don't matter. It's all about the movement, the body, the expression, the embodiment. And so I know it to be true for myself. Healthy competition is a masculine love language. Even me and my friends growing up, we would bet on anything. We would compete over the dumbest little things. Like it's in our nature to have that healthy competition. And its usefulness comes when it's time to collaborate. We as men get to sharpen each other. Iron sharpens iron, man sharpens man. When we have a common goal to meet, men working in collaboration can be incredibly creative and brilliant. Just look around whatever city you are in this world, places like Edinburgh, Scotland. Men built that city out of stone. And it's beautiful work. What happens when tribe and village comes together is we make the impossible tangible. We make what once was like a vision or a possibility, we bring it into reality. That's the power of human beings. And so that competition is necessary. You just watch a group of grown men playing again for the first time in a long time, and that alone can be so healing.
Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in. Today on Heart of Man, I'm honored to be joined by Adam Jackson, the co-founder and chief vision officer of Sacred Sons, a leading global organization devoted to modern men's work, fostering brotherhood, and promoting conscious healing. Renowned for hosting transformative large-scale men's gatherings such as Convergence and EMX, these immersive experiences bring men from all over the world together to engage in deep healing, personal growth, and authentic connection. Within Sacred Sons, Adam has played a pivotal role in creating spaces where men can explore their authentic selves, cultivate emotional resilience, and embrace embodied leadership. He's also the host of the Sacred Sons podcast, where he facilitates deep and transformative conversations with fellow leaders that guide men towards authentic masculinity and personal growth. Their work is rooted in the belief that brotherhood is the medicine, and that men's healing must be relational, physical, and grounded in nature. Through Sacred Sons, Adam and his team have been actively guiding the resurgence of the father archetype, both as a personal guide for wisdom and as a collective model for leadership and responsibility. In his personal life, fatherhood has deeply shaped Adam's own journey, inspiring a deep commitment to conscious parenting, meaningful relationships, and continual inner growth. As a dedicated partner and father, Adam strives to live with intention, harmonizing his roles as a parent, partner, leader, and visionary with purpose and authenticity. In our conversation, Adam and I dive into the philosophy behind Sacred Sons, exploring some of the key challenges he encounters that men are facing during their trainings. We discuss the importance of integrating embodiment alongside relational practices to foster deeper trust, connection, and emotional resilience. We unpack the importance of incorporating ritual combat, where men consciously engage with each other through the use of gloves as a tool for connection and growth. Adam also shares his insights on why he believes brotherhood is the medicine, and one of Sacred Sons' core missions in reintegrating the father archetype, both within individuals and in society as a whole. And these are just some of the subject matters we addressed. This was truly a rich and transformative discussion that dives into the heart of men's work with one of the leaders at the forefront of this movement. Now, without further ado, let's dive into the conversation with Adam. Today, I have a very special guest with us. He's one of the co-founders and the chief vision officer of Sacred Sons, currently one of the biggest men's movements in the world, if not the biggest men's movement. Alongside that, he's also the host of the Sacred Sons podcast and a devoted father. In his work, he holds a vision for ushering brotherhood to the forefront of our community as a means for conscious healing. Adam Jackson, I welcome you to the Heart of Man.
Thank you for having me, Alex. I appreciate that introduction and your warm welcome. And I appreciate your interest in men's work. I think it's one of the most powerful tools we have access to right now. I think it's a tool that is necessary for the evolution of masculinity on this planet and for human beings who are going through it. I think there's a profound shift in movement towards this healing work.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And just to give you a bit of a context, I've been on a journey of, I'm going to say, development for the last 8 or 9 years. And kind of the initial background that kind of got me into the work was philosophy, meditation, yoga. And then I went a little bit more into somatic work through breath work and then as well embodiment. But it was only like around 4 years ago where I start to recognize there's something around this theme, this topic of masculinity, where I noticed I felt an absence. I felt a lack in my life, and which really propelled me into this journey. And as mentioned, before we started rolling, I noticed as well that when I came into contact with some of the images and footage that you guys provide at Sacred Sons, it really gave me the sense like you guys are really creating a new story of what it means to have men connect with each other. So one of the places I would love for us to begin, Adam, is I would love to hear within the last 6 years where you guys have been doing Sacred Sons, when men come to your events, come to Convergence, I want to hear, what do you see where they're at in their journey? What do you see as some of the challenges as well? What is it that they're seeking when they come to the events?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I see a lot of myself in these men as they show up. A big part about my piece of creating Sacred Sons is that there was a moment, many moments, but there was a specific moment in my life where I was really going through it and I didn't have anybody to pick up the phone and just be honest with. It hit me at a time. And in saying that, I'm someone who has had brotherhood all throughout my life. I have an older brother who I grew up with. My father is incredibly generous and showed me a lot of things in my life. I played in a band early on in my career. I was even a part of engineering teams that can sometimes form, a semblance of brotherhood, right? We're all on a collective mission to design a product. But I found myself in a low point and not having someone to call. And I think that's the root of what men are showing up with into Sacred Sons. It's isolation. It's a moment of threshold where it's like, okay, my life is about to radically be transformed and I need to be witnessed through that. And there's a calling, there's a desire in the hearts of men for initiation, for rites of passage, for mentorship from someone who will just be honest with me. You know what I mean? And so what I see, and there's a ton of symptoms. I could list them all, the ones that you're thinking of. But the core of it is isolation. And it's a separation, not only from a sense of brotherhood, but really it's a separation from a sense of self. When we go through these big transformations in life, whether it's after a breakup, through divorce, coming out of addiction, whatever that challenge is, when we're at that threshold, there's a powerful force that comes when we collect and when we gather in circle as men.
One of the things that stood out for me when I hear you is this idea of being witnessed within our experience, being witnessed in this journey of transformation. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the importance of being witnessed as we go through these, I'm going to say, challenges, these initiations?
Yeah. And the witness is not just a one-way street. It's to see and to be seen. And so one of the pieces about the collective witness through that initiation is that when one man is doing his work and being witnessed, there's something that happens in a circle of men where we all go in together. We're all doing that work. There's a piece of a man's story that we all inherently resonate with once we come into like a space of acceptance, non-judgment, and honesty. And so what happens when men get really honest, being seen in your most raw, vulnerable expression, which is for a lot of men probably one of the scarier predicaments to be in. It's actually an incredibly empowering action, and I like to say we are not speaking of brotherhood as a noun. It's not some utopia we hope to achieve. It's a verb. It's an action. Brotherhood in action. That collective witness. That collective raising of all of us. It's really powerful medicine. And it's important to be seen in it. You mentioned some modalities, right? Breath work, which can be relational, but a lot of plant medicine ceremonies, a lot of tools that we have currently, they can oftentimes be more isolating, right? Even if you have an incredible plant medicine ceremony, you go back to your normal life, your family, you have no one to talk to about it. You have no way to integrate it into your actual life. Within a circle of men, it's built into that circle. And I think that's an important piece of the witness. Like, it's not just I went off and did something by myself. It's that there were other men with me.
Hmm. One of the statements that seems to really permeate through Sacred Sons is that brotherhood is the medicine. And it really does seem to reflect itself strongly that you guys are like holding this work in a very relational way. And there's this curiosity for me around what importance does relationship play in terms of the work that you guys do, and as well in this realm of men's work specifically.
Yeah, I know everything that we do is both physical and relational. And men's work for a very long time has been relational. It's about men circling up, sharing together. Oftentimes it can look like men sitting in like an office building in some fold out chairs. And so what we have found is by making it physical and relational and going out into nature, going out into the wild, so to speak, it allows for so much more movement to happen. The more we move our bodies, the more we play, the more we get out of our heads and into our hearts, then the relational work is so much more profound. It can become so much, there can be so much more depth because we're interrupting those patterns that we have accumulated throughout our life. We're in an absolutely new environment, doing new practices, having new thoughts arise. And like I'm saying, when we have the room to take a deep breath for ourselves and remember what it is to be our authentic self, not having to impress, not having to perform, but just to feel our way through. Yeah, the relational part is so crucial, but it's also crucial that we get in our bodies and move our bodies. And so it's like it's a dance between the two at our events.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit more about what happens when men get first exposed to, I'm going to say, the way that you guys bring through, I'm going to say, the structure, the rituals, the ceremonies. I imagine that in some ways it's like a disrupt in terms of what it is that they know, in terms of the way they lead their lives, especially if you tell me that they're kind of coming more from the stance of isolation. What happens when they start coming into contact with more relational ways of being, and how do you guys support the men as they lean into these edges?
Yeah. I think something that's important to note up front is we lead with a saying also, all of you is welcome. All of you is welcome here. So even the intense nervousness, the curiosity, the anxiety, I've done a lot of work before, it's all welcome. Like bring it all into the circle. And what we do is we have a sequence of processes, of movements that we do to drop men in, to peel back some of those layers of resistance, some of the layers of excitement even, right, about what we're doing. And so I can give you a taste of a sequence, which is our opening agreements. And so our agreements are known as chaos. It's like, how are we going to avoid chaos as 60 men out here in the desert, or as 90 men out here in BC, Canada? How are we going to avoid spinning into chaos? And so we make these agreements. And these are agreements we can make with others and ourselves. So our first agreement is confidentiality, or really what that is confidence. It's trust. Like, know that this takes courage. This work absolutely is going to take your courage to step in here and do this. And we need you brave for where we're going. So once we enter that confidential space, our second agreement is honesty. And what I find in the majority of men who come in is there are aspects in their life that they're not being honest with themselves or other. And so we carve out a space deep out in the forest or out in the desert for 4 days to be radically honest, and primarily for these men to be honest with ourselves about who we are, where we're going, who's coming with us, getting closer to the truth of ourselves so that we can start to come into contact with that inner essence and our purpose. Our next agreement is acceptance and non-judgment. Again, these are just peeling back the layers of what men carry out in the world. Men are constantly projecting onto one another, judging each other. Even just walking down the street, there's a sense that you have to size each other up. If you work in a corporate environment, there's a sense that you are in competition with one another. We create an environment of acceptance. Like, can you accept whatever your brother has to share with you? And more so, can you accept yourself and your worthiness to be here in this lifetime, on this planet, just as you are? Because that's how we're going to treat you. You're just as worthy as any other man here. And that's like a sentiment that a lot of men don't get that reflection from other men. I'm saying these words, and however it's coming through as someone's listening, but it's actually it's a very deep thing for men to be accepted for who they are as they are. And then our last two agreements, ownership. We are encouraging our brothers to take ownership of your thoughts, your words, and your actions. The time for blaming others is over. The time for putting it on everyone else but you is over. You know what all your relationships have in common? You are in all of them. Take ownership for your part. Take ownership for the whole of those thoughts, words, and actions. And that piece is huge for men. And I have to say, the ownership, the way we can do that is through accountability. And so we also bring accountability into our circles. We partner men up and have them actually make commitments and hold each other accountable to the parts of their life that they're showing up to own. And then our last agreement is the sacred, as you mentioned. This is a part that Sacred Sons has brought into men's work because it's required. Once you are honest in a place of acceptance and ownership, then we can walk with the sacred. Then we can call in the ancestors. Then we can call in the elements, the directions. Then we can bring order to the chaos through the sacred. And so these are the rituals that we create together in these circles. This is how we hold the sacred in a good way. And for any individual out there, this is a non-dogmatic. We are accepting of all faiths, and we encourage, like, if you have sacred tradition to bring into this circle as an offering, we invite that in with our men because it brings so much unity when we as men pray together again, when we play together, and when we sing together. So that's an example of like a sequence. And this sequence, you could apply this to your own life really in any situation. And so I like to just bring that in when I am in a place of chaos. I like to get really clear with myself. Am I being honest? Am I being courageous? Am I accepting others who are in this situation with me? And I kind of go through, and then I acknowledge the sacred, acknowledge that that God is bigger than all of us and all of this, and that God's got us. No matter what you call it or how you pray to it, there's an understanding that God's got us, and we're all in this together.
Yeah, I love all this, and what really comes up for me is that there is really this integration of both sides, right? There's the side, the more softer elements that you guys bring in terms of like non-judgment, welcoming, allowing, accepting, like all of you is ultimately welcome, right? Whereas the other one is bringing men to a standard that you want to hold them to, but as well, the recognition of what it is that they really need in order to really lead themselves and their lives in a more, I'm going to say, effective way.
Yeah, I mean, one important thing is there's no forcing with us. There's a few different types of men's work out there, but there's this idea that you got to like break a man down. You got to tell him he's worthless. He's a piece of shit. He fucked up, and break him down to build him back up. We don't do that. We extend invitations only. I see this work as something that one has to enter into with willingness and with openness. And there's room for that. Maybe there's those Navy SEALs who just got to go through that depth. You know what I mean? And for the majority of men out here, it's really about getting reconnected to nature externally, get your feet back on the ground, but also to get back into contact with their inner nature, with your inner knowingness, with that inner compass. And so we do that through invitations and not through forcing. I think that's what that brings up for me. And it's, it's just a difference in the approach that we're taking with men. There's a lot of this like materialistic, also, kind of, you could say the word misogynistic masculine culture that exists. And we're just doing something a little bit different. Doesn't make it better or worse. There's just room for it. And so, I like to acknowledge that this is invitations only. And I find that men go deeper through invitation than through force.
Absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned that one of the themes that you bring in is the return of the sacred. I want to hear a bit more about why this is so important and what happens when you guys bring in these more, I'm going to say, ritualistic or ceremonial ways of being.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they're here because they're here. We're in a generation. We're in a generation of appropriation, but we're also in a generation of cultural transformation, appreciation, education. Many of our brothers in Sacred Sons come from so many different walks of life, and that's a reality. And all throughout time and history, culture has emerged. New songs have emerged. We have this static picture of how culture actually operates. But over long periods of time, there is an evolution to all cultures. Nothing is really static in the universe. And so what's happening is, what I'm saying is it's natural. It's natural that our brothers from South America will bring their songs. It's natural that our brothers from Mexico will bring their songs. When we go to Scotland, our Scottish brothers bring their songs. And so the sacred is where there's room for that. The sacred is where there's room for cultural innovation. I think that's a big piece of this, is that we are coming at this from a perspective of saying there's room for evolution. It's time we bring back initiations, rites of passage. We know it's time because we didn't have it. And then honestly, I just, over these last 6 years, I've seen the impact of this work on men's lives over and over. And I just wouldn't be doing it if I didn't believe in the power of it, if I hadn't felt the power of it in my own life. And so the sacred is a big part of that. I also am one, I grew up Catholic. I'm grateful for my upbringing. I'm grateful for what I learned, what I liked, what I didn't like, for the maybe the relationship I have with Christ and Christ consciousness as a result of that. And again, I think there's room in this culture now that actually is existing, where we get to be open to the sacred in many different ways. And so in men's work, it made sense. A lot of our brothers are sitting in ceremonies. Some of these men are sun dancers, or some of these men come from different cultural lineages. And so when we come together as men, there's a knowingness in our bones. We all feel it. And it's like, yeah, maybe we're not New Zealanders and we don't have the haka. And we don't need to, because we can cultivate, we can utilize the technology that's here just between us. And we can use our voices and we can shout to the stars. We can call on our ancestors just the same. And because we've forgotten how to do that, we're relearning and we're practicing. And I'm saying this in a humble way. We have nothing figured out. We're not special. We're on a mission, and we genuinely feel it. And what happens when we're in circle in those ways, and we're coming at this in a prayerful way, powerful and deep transformation happens within all of us.
What is the experience of the individuals who, let's say, don't have that connection to the sacred, who don't have that connection to?
They get reconnected. And it's not just the sacred. Let's just talk about their emotional body. Let's just talk about their ability to feel. That's actually what gets connected in our, like I would say in a 4-day, we have what's called an EMX, embodied masculine experience, or through a convergence. So many men are blocked from their ability to feel. There's something that maybe happened, or a few things that happened that caused them to stuff the emotion down and to just go, you know what? I'm gonna stop feeling that. Typically, it's after the first heartbreak. That was my case. That was like my experience. That's when I was like, oh, I need to protect this heart. Let me put a block of ice around it for the next relationship.
I can relate to that.
You know what I'm saying? Like this is a part of what happens from boyhood to manhood. And I talk about it all the time. Relationships have been some of the biggest, and specifically breakups in relationships have been some of the biggest catalysts for change in my life.
Absolutely.
And so what I mean but coming back into a weekend when a man is going through an initiation, and we are going through some very specific processes, long eye gazing, asking very specific questions, and again engaging like in a very honest way, men start to feel again. So before even like the connection to the divine, they become connected to themselves and the divine within. You know, that's where the real sacred really is within each of these men. And so as I'm saying, like there's cultural traditions or rituals, what that's really leading a man towards is closer to his spark, to his essence, to his own connection to God. And what I see, it comes first through the emotions, and this is kind of like a feminine aspect of this work. It comes first through the emotions, and then guys have even said to me, wow, like I'm looking at the flowers blooming or the leaves changing color for the first time, or the sound of this waterfall is just like next level. It's like, yeah, your senses are back online. And it didn't come from being intoxicated, you know, or inebriated. It didn't come from substance. It comes from sustenance. It comes from real relating, from that honesty and from the depth of like what we can create together as men. And so it goes from that connection to the emotions. Wow, I'm really able to feel again, noticing in the land, feeling the land, walking barefoot, going for that, you know, cold plunge in a river, whatever it is. You know, those things are there. And then you start to get that connection to spirit once again. And that's what I've seen. And I've seen men, there's kind of a misconception, like people who are into new age spirituality, you know, they're lost and looking for something. And there's truth to the idea that there's orphans out here. And there's also truth that sometimes this work and that reconnection strengthens men's relationship with the religion that they were raised in, you know, and I love to see that as well.
In terms of what you mentioned around what you find is that with a lot of the individuals that initially come to your spaces, that they're somewhat emotionally stunted. A lot of it comes from relational challenges that they have had that led them to create some form of armor. I can definitely see that and relate to that in my own experiences. I'm curious to hear, how do you guys support these individuals in reconnecting back to their emotional bodies and really find that ability to feel again? Because that's what I see is such a big challenge for a lot of men. If they've really entrained themselves to override their own physiological signals, often it can be quite tricky for them to really reconnect to that. So I'm curious, how do you guys navigate that?
There's so many ways, and even though we're going through a similar sequence, it's going to be different for every man. But the substance here, or like the root of it here, is changing the story. What is the story you are coming in here with? Like, what is the story you're telling yourself? What is that story that's preventing you or blocking the access to love in your heart? Because it's a story, straight up. Especially like that thing that happened yesterday, 10 years ago, whatever. The meaning that we give that story is what's in the way. You know, it's what's preventing love to flow into those spaces. So I think it has to do a lot with getting men out of their stories, back into their hearts, like I'm talking about, and then kind of rewriting that story for themselves. And what typically happens, here's the actual flip that happens. Like I could walk you through a hypothetical experience, but I think what's more important to know is that when a man flips or inverts that story of his pain that he's been carrying for so long, I just was at a weekend where a man, he literally said to us, I've never told this to anyone before, and boom, here it is. And he's like 46 years old, holding on to a story from way back. Never even felt safe enough to share it. Do you know what happens for a brother, like when you, or sister, or human being, when you unlock or unblock something like that story? And so what happens is you make that inversion of the story of your pain into your superpower. We rally around that pain. We raise it up. You know, we bless it. And typically that brother now has medicine that he carries for someone else. When we invert that pain, we feel the shift within us. We're telling ourselves that new story. or making meaning in a new way of that story, then we get to flip it into service. And so that's thus bring it back to the circle.
Yeah.
Because when that man shared his story or laid down his burden, no doubt there's a room full of men with tears in their eyes who all resonate, right? In some way, in some small way. It may not be their story, but they're like, we're carrying the load with you now. It makes it lighter. And then you flip that back into service. Cool. Like share this with the next men that come through. And that's a part of the transmutation that's really powerful, specifically in men's work, because men are doers, we're fixers, we love to give advice. You know us. Men's work is a way we get to exercise all those things that come naturally to us. It really is. And it's not like you're coming to a space where everyone's just giving you unsolicited advice, but guaranteed in a circle of men, there's one person there who's got some deep wisdom to share. Basically at every iteration of our time together. And so we get to actually share it. We're talking about kind of depth of work, but there's also a celebratory, an aspect to the work that is incredibly positive, that is encouraging, that is acknowledging, and that is like celebrating like how great we all are. And I think that's important too, to note. This is not some like cry fest where you just come and it's going to be all sad. There's a lot of grieving we have to do as men. There's a lot of harm that's currently being perpetrated on this planet. I happen to believe that we as men are responsible, and it's important that we take ownership of the aspects of harm that exist within each of us, right? And so this is a way to do that.
Yeah, I think this could be a good place for us to bring in this idea of the father archetype. And in my research on you, I came to see that I regularly hear you speak about this idea that Sacred Sons is really about returning the father archetype back. What is it about the father archetype specifically that you believe is so important for us to reclaim?
Yeah, that was like our first tagline, that we put together out there. And so it exists. And it's real because do you know your archetypes? Well, do you know?
I do. Yeah.
So what are the primary 4 archetypes?
King, warrior, magician, lover.
King, warrior, magician, lover. And so where do I want to go? In an incredibly odd way, the father is missing from this archetypal wisdom. And I find that the culture of king, warrior, magician, lover lacks the nurturing embrace and grounded presence of the father. The responsibility of the father. And I know that the king archetype, the king, is really the gateway emotion is joy. It's about being in service to the kingdom. But there's something that's missed when we skip the father. Because that is what our families need. This is what our homes need. We need fathers. Like we're not in a time where we need more warriors or more kings. We're so far from that. Like we're in a time of getting back to the basics and bringing our fathers home, keeping our fathers close to our children. Even, a lot of the fathers I meet are in co-parenting dynamics, men coming in after divorce, all of these things. In the presence of ourselves as fathers, especially in these dynamics, like I think it's humbling, and it's important that we return to some of those characteristics that the father really bestows. And I think it's important culturally that we acknowledge that. There's a lot of king talk, you know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, that's there's room for that. And there's a broader conversation about like actually the majority of households are are being held without men in them. And the nuclear family model has failed us. And so there is, with the return of the father archetype, it is also about acknowledging and having reverence for the mother as well. It's important. All of the masculine talk, like who are we doing it for? What are we doing it for? If it's not for the women and children, I don't really want anything to do with it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like there's a lot of there's a lot of men's work out there that could be deemed, you use the words personal development, self-improvement. It's actually much more than that. I think it's cultural shifts. I think it's paradigm shifts. I think it's like fathers taking ownership and saying like, no, I'm not going to do the same thing my father did. Or not, I'm not even going to, you know what? I'm not going to blame my father because he didn't know. And because his dad before him didn't have it, or whatever that is, whatever that story is for those men. Return of the Father archetype is also shedding that blame and that story away from our own fathers and returning it to our ability to reparent ourselves, whether you're a father or not. Right.
Mm.
That might even be some of the initial work for the men who are coming in who are not fathers. There's a big opening to embody and to do some work around that.
Yeah, this is something I've been contemplating a lot on. I mean, I'm personally not a father, but simultaneously, I have been quite deeply, I'm going to say, initiated into this idea of the father archetype, at least within myself, and just as well notice how the influence and the, I'm going to say, influence or impact that I had with my own father was leading me to tend to myself. And I noticed how unconsciously I was inhabiting the same, I'm going to say, critical ways towards myself, very much that my father initially adopted onto me, right? And so a big part of the work that I've really had to go through is to inquire into like what those parts of me actually really needed, what that younger part of me really needed when I lacked ultimately the presence and the encouragement that I really needed. So it seems to be really important as well in my own kind of personal journey around this. So yeah, I love this conversation around it.
Yeah, I mean, it's helpful to have a map, right? And archetypal wisdom can be seen as a type of map. It's a way to navigate. It's a way to track our emotions. And I think it's important. I think it's always important to stay curious and to question, why did Gillette and Moore, bring it down to these four archetypes? Why did we narrow it down to these four archetypes and create a culture of men kind of coming at this perspective when there are so many archetypes that we could choose from, right?
Yeah, I
And so
agree.
it's important for men to have a map, and that map can look different for everyone. It's a way for us to like really engage with a trajectory. Because what happens is when men are in those valleys, it's like they're looking for a north. They're looking to like get back on track, right? And so they can be very helpful. But I don't actually like to give them too much power, because if the tool's not useful, if it's too much back into the mind and not like a felt experience, it can also become kind of a trap in a way. Meaning like you can become over psychoanalytical analysis paralysis and trying to figure it out too much. And what we do, again, to keep it physical and relational, is we're going to like move our bodies. We're going to move with these archetypes. And so if we're going to talk about the warrior, cool, we're going to put the gloves on. We're not going to psychoanalyze what does it look like to be a gardener in a war, warrior in a gardener in a war. We're going to put the gloves on and we're going to have a real experience. And that type of experience can be incredibly healing, even though for some it may seem like, it is a threshold, and there's a healthy amount of fear that's involved in stepping into a sparring match. But it's a felt experience. When we get together as Sacred Sons, we're not there to figure anything out. We're going to feel and experience our way through everything.
Mm. Why do you see the importance around like making everything experiential?
Because for most of us, like in the Western world, we were raised to keep everything up in our heads, sit down, be quiet in school and memorize and regurgitate. And so a lot of the men who come through, they're all up here, and they have the ability to analyze and to filter and to justify. But it's like when there's a punch coming at your face, there's no talking your way out of it. You either move or you get hit. And it's important because what happens when you get hit, boom, for some guys, it's a lot of guys come in there, they've never been in a fight. And that's okay. That's okay. But we're like, who's never been punched in the face? Like 10 hands go up. You're all going to get hit in the face today. Is that okay? Like, cool. You agreed to do this? Yeah, great. And we build our way up to it. But what happens is when you get hit in the face like that, it wakes you up and you realize, oh, I can actually take a punch. It's not that bad. Like, oh, where in my life do I actually need to create stronger boundaries? Where do I need to move? Where do I need to slip? It conjures all kinds of actual tangible responses to situations in our lives because it's a lived experience. And it's not like it's a real experience. You know what I'm saying? It's not theoretical. And I think some of the learnings and some of the observations that we've all collectively made is that things need to be really experienced to be understood.
Yeah, just to comment on the ritual combat that you guys bring in. I mean, I've seen some of the incredible footage that you guys have of those moments, and I actually had an experience last year where I was in a 3-day immersive experience by some close brothers out here in Bali, and what they brought through was this combination of boxing and as well relational men's work, and it was really interesting as well, like to really have that as an experience where we would really walk between those poles of having deep practice of eye gazing and softening ultimately our bodies as we're in contact with other men, whilst at the same time putting the gloves on and getting hit whilst as well hitting another individual.
Yeah.
And it's profound as I see it, because there was something healing about it in terms of like, I got bullied at school, I got punched in the face, I got hit. And so with that, for me, that was really an opportunity as well to reclaim my own power in those moments.
In a safe container.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I want to hear a little bit more about the value of ritual combat and really bringing individuals into these type of spaces.
Yeah. I think it's important to say we should not deny ourselves the expression of any emotion. I don't see anger or even like aggression as a negative emotion. I think these are all kind of like signals. They're just signaling. And so we say it's not about what happens in the fight, it's about what happens after the fight. And that's what you're speaking to. For myself, because I could share a bunch of men's stories, but in the beginning, we were in the garage in Maui, like actually trying to cultivate and to figure out what works. And we would have, I guess I should say this, a few of us, men of Sacred Sons, the founders, we lived together on Maui through COVID in one house for about 1.5 years. And it was a phenomenal time. And we cultivated a lot of the deep brotherhood processes and work that we do as Sacred Sons because we were utilizing these tools ourselves, including putting on the gloves and fighting. Enrolling, and doing jujitsu and also wrestling and shooting bow and arrow and all the things. That's like really bonding stuff. But what we found is like when a man is exhausted, when you're at the peak of exhaustion and you have an adrenaline dump because you got in your first fight in a very long time or ever, and you got hit in the face and it woke you the fuck up for the first time ever. And you're at the peak of exhaustion after even just like a 2 or 3 minute round. What comes from that man is absolute honesty. It's like the truth of what it really means, of what really needs to happen next, of what really needs to shift for him or what needs to be reclaimed, like in your story. Yeah. And recently there was the youngest man in one of our circles. He picked the biggest, strongest guy. And we're all like, okay, I guess this is going to happen. And the big, and he was much older as well. And really like towering over the young man. And after the fight, it was good. It was really good. They met each other in a good way. And afterwards, the older gentleman was just like, I wanted to meet him. I wanted to give him what he really wanted. Like I could see how much he needed this to come in and just to face me. And I know how much courage that takes to face a guy like me, right? And the younger man really got that he needed to face the dragon. And that's not a uncommon thing for a smaller guy to want to fight a bigger guy, right? I think that happens even in bars. There's a saying for that. But what's powerful in a safe container where we've made those agreements that I listed previously is what happens is that younger man got to move so much pain and all that bullying that he experienced and all of that got to be moved through this 2 minutes, 120 seconds of his life to reclaim all that hurt and to shift it into an empowered state. That's what's absolutely magical and mystical about this work. You know, a lot of what we do, it happens right in front of our eyes, but it's like a few minutes of a very deep experience can be so powerfully transformative in the same way that you shared. And so now, you know, I see a lot of men out there in men's work doing things like ritual combat, whether it's wrestling. The guys in Fit for Service, they do some kendo sword fighting, but it's important to have a physical element that involves real danger and that involves actually being met. And another key here that I like to bring up is that most men are the strongest person in their household. That means like they spend the majority of their time being the biggest and strongest. Make sense? So if we don't have the actual experience of being met physically, some of our tendencies to want to overpower or want to dominate because we're the biggest and strongest around. It's like, no. Get with a circle of men, feel what it feels like to be met equally exhausted. And it does something to us. It brings humility. It brings in a humility that we need as men. Men need, I would argue for myself, I need to be humbled from time to time. You know, I need to be to the point where my stories no longer can even come through because I'm so exhausted in the moment that like the truth of like what needs to happen next is present.
Yeah, humility was definitely the word that stood out for me when I heard this as well. And I want to as well bring in this idea of competition. And one of the things I actually heard you speak of is that healthy competition in form of play is ultimately a masculine love language. I want to hear a little bit more about what it is that you consider around that.
I have said that before. One of the interesting things about play is that it typically doesn't involve language. So imagine, you know, and we're playing play in the form of wrestling, striking. We have some incredible collaborative games. But what I love about play and competitive play is that the words don't matter. It's all about the movement, the body, the expression, the embodiment, more so than the mind getting in the way. And so, yeah, I do. I know it to be true for myself. Healthy competition is a masculine love language. Like even me and my friends growing up, we would bet on anything. We would compete over the the dumbest little things. Like it's in our nature to have that healthy competition, and its usefulness comes when it's time to collaborate. We as men get to sharpen each other. Iron sharpens iron, man sharpens man. And when we meet a common goal, or when we have a common goal to meet, men working in collaboration can be incredibly creative and brilliant. And just look around, you know, whatever city you are in this world, especially if you go to places like Edinburgh, Scotland, like men built that city out of stone. And it's beautiful work. You know what I mean? And you can look at what happens when men truly collaborate. I actually don't know if we've been to the moon, but let's just say we have. Like that was a result of humans collaborating and being extremely competitive, not with each other, but with themselves to accomplish an impossible goal. What happens when men come together and humans and women and community, let's just call it what it is. What happens when tribe and village comes together is we make the impossible tangible. We make what once was like a vision or a possibility, we bring it into reality. That's the power of human beings. We really can do that. And so that competition is necessary, that competitive spirit. But what happens is in modern culture, you know, our corporate ladders, people are climbing, people who are collaborating for the same company are in competition with each other for the next raise, for the next promotion, for the thing. And so they never get to a place of synergy and true collaboration because their actions are not in service to the whole. And so we exercise as a circle and through some of these games that we have where it's like, it's not over until everybody's through, right? We have these incredible experiences where we have challenges for men. And it's not about who can do it the fastest, who can do it the best. It's about, can you get your entire team through this experience, no matter who's on the team, and find out the ways to use your genius, to use your collaborative skill to solve problems. We got a lot of problems in the world that need and deserve solutions. We also have a lot of people just talking about problems. And so my encouragement through this work, through this games, we are practicing, we are training. I also look at this work as much as it's ritual and initiation, it's also practice. It's also training. Where else are you going to practice to show up, huge in your life? Where else are you going to get the training? Like, why not do it in the presence of a group of men who are also coming to be better? And so, play, collaboration, it sparks a non-verbal response, and it comes through our hearts, man. And what happens is, like, we have silly games too, and you just watch a group of grown men playing again for the first time in a long time, and that alone can be so healing. Again, it's not always about the depth of the shadow work. Sometimes it's like, my gosh, I just need to get out and run around and play, be free a bit.
That is something I would love for us to get a little bit more into. I know that you guys have one of the core tenets, which is celebration, and this idea of bringing in more play. And I can imagine that, especially for those individuals who live in isolation, who have this deep sense of disconnection from self, it's kind of like the joy and the sense of like playfulness and the lightheartedness has kind of like been stripped out of them. I can definitely see in myself as well that it's just been something that I've really had to consciously bring back into my life, because I would say in so many ways.
When did you, Alex, stop playing? Like, if you were to look back in your life, like, when did you stop playing? What would you say?
Oh man, it's a great question. I would say it's probably somewhere in my teens. Yeah, when wait, let me say it differently. I think it's somewhere around like late teens. I think one of the ways that play expressed itself for me was team sports. So that was definitely a great way for me to exercise that muscle. But as soon as I left that realm, that is where I would say play in many ways has left me.
Yeah. For me, I skateboarded into my teenage years. And really, I probably skateboarded into my 20s. But what comes up for me when I ask that question is I remember specifically, I had a little skateboard crew of friends. We all used to skate together, and then one of us got a car, and it's like, yes, now we can go to other places and skate. And then I remember I got a car and I got a girlfriend, and the skateboard went in the back of the car. And then I had to get a job to pay for the car and for the insurance and for the girlfriend. And then before I knew it, I stopped playing. I stopped skating. We stopped circling up with the bros because the responsibility crept in, or the idea of what's important. And like, when I think about that, it's like, oh man, like, I wanted to do all that just so I could skate more. And then it took up all that space, and I eventually stopped. And it's funny because at a recent men's event that I was at, our Prime Leadership here in Big Bear, California, I made a commitment to start skating again because my oldest son is skateboarding. And so it's like, cool. It's not like you're with training wheels anymore with Noah. So it's like, let me go out and skate with you. Like, it's one thing for me to stand on the side and show you how to ollie, tell you how to ollie. Watch me do it a bunch of times. And so I've been busting out my old decks and skating with my kids. And
Nice.
I think it's important to like tap back into the things that we genuinely loved. That's a part of our inner essence, tapping into that. When we talk about the lover, the inner child, the inner essence, that play really lands well with that archetype, right? And so for me, it's important to stay evolving, just because again, I'm not some special person. I haven't arrived anywhere. I'm a part of an incredible organization that I co-founded, and I'm working on myself all the time. Like, truly.
You mentioned your son, Noah. I'm curious to hear what are some of those very foundational lessons that you've learned by becoming a father, and how has it shaped you in your own understanding of who you are as a man?
I'm still drinking from the fire hose of fatherhood. I've got Noah's 9. He'll be 10 in September, but Holland is 4, Johan is 2, and Winona is 6 months. So I have a 6-month-old daughter. So I'm still in it. I'm a young dad. I'm learning every day. I'm not at a point to be like, I have drawn the wisdom to share with all fathers. But that said, what I believe in is the wisdom of all fathers. And so we have a father's council online and as a part of our circle, but also father's council in these experiences. And when fathers come together to share their frustration, to share their joy, to share their love, to share their absence too, that's where the beauty and the wisdom lies. It's like fathers supporting other fathers is also a missing resource in the larger village, right? It used to be there. It used to just have it. I'm sure listen, I live in a cul-de-sac. I'm not like circling up with all the fathers in the cul-de-sac to share our pains and our joys, although maybe we should be. You know what I mean? But it's something that's really a really powerful resource. Let me think. What have I really gleaned that's helpful? Yeah. Okay. The biggest piece here for me in terms of fatherhood is actually not directed towards my children. It's towards their mother or mothers. And what I've learned to be incredibly valuable is by prioritizing the relationship to Hannah, to the mother of my children, and making sure that she's taken care of. It's like, it's a top-down thing. It's a trickle-down thing when mom and dad are doing good. Like the whole family does good. And it's not just as simple as happy wife, happy life. It's like, is mom really being supported? And I think that's a personal thing for me that I've been learning along my journey. Certainly not making it about me. Stop taking things personally. Stop getting triggered by the mess, because it is a mess. And for me, there's a lot of mess to clean up, and seeing the joy and the God in the mess is very important. Having the love of the parents be the beacon for our family, I think, is very important. And it's something that I didn't see as an example. And so I'm actually having to rediscover that for myself. And I've made a lot of mistakes along the way to learn that. As we do.
I'm curious to hear, what would you love to say to those individuals who are, I'm going to say coming fathers or intend to become fathers, in terms of preparing them on their journeys?
Yeah. So that's interesting for me, because what I've come to find out is, like, fathers also deserve that initiation into fatherhood, like a father's blessing. This is something that I have offered for men, and it's really powerful. A lot of attention, and rightly so, is on the mom and the baby and the gender reveal and all that kind of stuff. But ritually, because the man is not giving birth, there's not a biophysical experience that the man is having. There is another rite of passage beckon, similar. It's like, okay, if you're going to get married, you go out with your bros and you celebrate. When you're going to become a father, get a group of fathers around you and let them authentically give you the advice that you specifically need. Whether that's from, the father of your partner or of your beloved, and the men that are around your community, the men that are really going to support you through this journey of fatherhood, and let them give you actual reflections. I could give general advice, but it's going to be general advice. What I find to be really helpful is a guy looking me in the eyes who knows me enough to be able to tell me the truth about something that I need to hear. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is so fucking valuable. And so to ask me, I'm like, let's create this more spaces for that to happen. Let's bring that into the culture. So that's not something we have to go seek outside of ourselves, but so that we create that within our own communities. Does that make sense? So we are training our men to bring that level of service again, to the young fathers in their life, to the brothers in their life.
Mm.
That would be my encouragement. As a father, when there are young fathers around you, circle them up and give them authentic advice. Me sitting here to give unsolicited advice, I have a million things to say. And like I said, I'm learning so much daily about my own fathering. And so I like to keep it humble with that. But I so know the value of being able as a dad to call other men who are fathers who can understand. Like, having that as a resource is incredibly powerful. So become resourced. New men, young dads, find other dads, get resourced. It's about to get hard. It's about to get messy. Shit's going to get real. Get some men around you. You know what I mean?
I think we're going to be slowly starting to wrap up the conversation. But one of the things that I would love for us to maybe just touch on is, as mentioned at the beginning, that Sacred Sons is one of the biggest men's movements at the moment. And from my understanding as well, before you founded the company, ultimately there was this sense that, who am I to do this? Who am I to step into this type of work? And I would love for you to share us a little bit more about that journey that you've had to go through, that threshold that you had to trespass so you could ultimately step into this. And I mean, it does really seem like it what has ultimately birthed has become so much bigger than you may have even initially imagined.
It's important to first say that Sacred Sons is not just me. This is an organization co-founded by 3 of us originally. We've since added 2 additional co-founders, and we have so many men who create the tapestry of what is Sacred Sons. And for my part in it, I bring a lot of creativity to it. I bring a lot of like creational energy and branding. And I love the videos that we have on Instagram. And I'm so about the culture. I think before acknowledging that it's a movement of men, I think really what we are is a culture first. And so we are attempting to create a culture, of creation, creativity, new songs, new ways to pray, new rituals, and all of those things. And it's really because of the tapestry of men who create our community. And yeah. I was told, I'll just tell you mythologically, I once went to a psychic in Sedona, California, or in Sedona, Arizona. It was a very interesting experience. I was at a time in my life where I could have used some guidance. And I think I asked some relationship questions. And this woman who's a psychic, she told me, like, you know what? I don't see you I'm not seeing a picture of you in a relationship. She goes, I see you on top of a hill and there's only men and there's a bunch of men around you. And I'm just like, what could you possibly be talking about? You know what I mean? Like, what is this vision that you are seeing? And I totally shook it off and went back into my like, okay, which girl am I going to be with? This is why I went to the psychic. Years later, after I'd found ceremony through Sweat Lodge, through a Nipi ceremony, that kind of set me onto a spiritual seeking journey for myself. I traveled around the world. I tried many different experiences and plants and all types of brews, so to speak. I grew up, I was straight edge. I was not like someone who casually partook in any kind of drugs or alcohol. all the way up until my 30s. So when I got my real spiritual awakening, I had been in my life absolutely sober up until that point. And I loved that about myself, holding that energy. But when I had this breakthrough and through Sweat Lodge, and I was sitting every month for a few years there. I kind of like went on that quest and really sat with those medicines. And through that time, I was shown these same visions. The name Sacred Sons came through an ayahuasca ceremony that I sat in here in Joshua Tree, California. And I remember that moment that you were referencing from somewhere else that I may have told it is the spirit kind of showed me. I had all these blockages that I didn't know enough, that I needed to learn more. I needed to read more. I needed to take in more information. And she showed me just like, whew, I saw all the information that I was seeking, right? I could visually see it look like books and in a temple and scrolls. And it was showing me like, okay, here's the possibility for what you think needs to happen. And the spirit of the grandmother spirit of ayahuasca showed me, like, if you can embody your fullest expression, there are not enough pages in all of the books on earth that can embody what you can embody. And not just me, every single one of us. Like, if we truly tap into our essence, we become the book. We become that greatness which we seek from the past, from those who may have found it for a moment and had enough audacity to write it down for us in the future. But we are the same humans. We have the same bodies. We may be born at a different time. We may have slightly different technology or language, but we still have that ability to once again, like, rekindle the connection to the divine and have it come through us in a way that is authentic to us. And that experience is absolutely enlivening. The recognition that we are the living ancestors. Can we be okay with that? And with that knowingness, how will we walk? How will we show up for those that we love? How will we show up for the world? And most importantly, how will we show up when no one's watching? In showing me that, like, oh, you can embody more than what's possible than taking in all this information. My initial response to this, and in the same way, I'm like, wow, this work is really being asked of and called for. And I was just like, me? Like, no way. I was so resistant to it until like those first few men's circles where I got to see the magic of like what's actually possible. And I've felt myself through ceremonies. I also had a whole couple of years of serving as a guardian in many of these type of ceremonies and really honing my presence and understanding that, oh man, I have the capacity not only to hold my family and my children, but to be a witness, to be a hollow vessel for others who are on their own journey. I really connected to that aspect of myself where others get to see those reflections within them. I've gone into the depths in a way that when I get in space with others, it really does fill me up and who I am genuinely to be in service in that way. And just like helping our brothers. It's a long, long road, helping our brothers, on their path. It's incredibly rewarding.
Absolutely.
And so ultimately, I'm so happy that I chose yes.
Yeah, for sure. Just want to thank you, first of all, for coming on. This has been an epic conversation. And I just really enjoyed you parting all this wisdom and all these insights, and as well your experiences with all of us and the listeners. So thank you for coming on. Before I ask you my final question, where can our listeners find you? And is there anything that you would like to bring our listeners an awareness to?
Yes. You can find Sacred Sons at Sacred Sons on Instagram, sacredsons.com. You can find me, Adam Jackson, at Adam Jackson on socials. Really, I'm on Instagram. That's about it. You can also find me hosting the Sacred Sons podcast, which I drop weekly episodes. Similar to what you're doing, man, just having genuine conversations with all people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all kinds of teachers. And, I love podcasting, man. I think it's an expedited form of education. Like when you're in the driver's seat asking questions, when I'm in the driver's seat asking questions to people who are brilliant, I learn so much, And so, I really enjoy that. So you can catch me there at the Sacred Sons podcast. That's everywhere podcasts are available.
I'll make as well sure to put all that in the show notes, and definitely want to as well attest to the value of the Sacred Sons podcast. I'm a regular listener myself and got a lot of value out of it. So thanks, Adam.
Yes.
It's great for sure, man.
Thank you.
Yeah. And let's close it off here with one final question, which is for all the brothers who are checking in here today, I wonder, what is that one message that you would love to impart with them? And like, what is it that you think you would love to have them get out of this conversation that we've had here today?
For the brothers who are listening, specifically tuning in from Sacred Sons, remember the journey that you've been on. In the words of my brother Kale, we all have an individual connection to spirit. And I'm encouraging all of my brothers to remember that who you are, why you're here, is important. And it's incredibly valuable. I believe this human experience is a highly sought after experience in all of creation. And so let's treat it as such. Let's walk in a good way. And remember to remember. Love you. Mean it.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.